So, hello everybody. I am here co-hosting the Visioneers room at the Up Convergence Global Summit. My name is Tatiana Speed, and I have the great honor and privilege today of interviewing Dr. Geraldine Schwartz. And Gerri is a psychologist, applied scientist, educator, essayist, and poet. She is the founder and senior psychologist of the Vancouver Learning Centre, and she has spent more than 30 years transforming the lives of hundreds of young people faced with learning challenges. And before we get into the interview, I just wanted to share that I have a very personal connection to Gerri. I've known her since I was 8 years old, and I am one of the young people whose lives she so affected with her work. I first...
Louder.
Yeah? Oh, okay. I first met Gerri when I went to the Vancouver Learning Centre, and I was struggling with some really severe learning challenges, and she did for me what she's done for so many young people. She refused to see my limitations. She saw me as a possibility, and she built, using her knowledge of neuroscience and neuroplasticity and the brain, an incredible, innovative curriculum that completely transformed all my learning outcomes, and I was able to really thrive in my academic life and graduate from high school as an honors with distinction student and a scholarship and a place in a really prestigious program at UBC. So I'm very grateful to this incredible woman, and I just wanted to share that personal story to sort of frame the conversation, because she has a very big dream that she is building right now. She has founded an organization with her partner, Dr. Desmond Berghofer, an organization called the Visioneers International Network, Web of Good Work, and Virtual Expo. And it's a very big dream, but if you know Gerri as I know her, you know that she does not see limitations, she sees possibilities, and so I know that it is only a matter of time before her full vision comes to fruition. And so today she's going to tell us about this vision. But Gerri, first of all, welcome. And before you sort of tell us about the Visioneers, I would love for you to share from your perspective as a neuroscientist and your understanding of neuroplasticity, the connection you see between the work you've done with young children, young adults, and the work you're now about to do on behalf of the world.
Okay. Well, I want to spend most of our time talking about the Visioneers and the Web of Good Work. But I think that I should start with my science. It's important to understand that neuroscience is in a moment of great thriving, and information is just pouring out of all the sources and the journals to support the concept of neuroplasticity. But it also is making new discoveries about the brain. This 3-pound brain that is in your head and mine with 100 billion neurons, the technology allows us to look deeply by magnifying more than 100,000 times to see each neuron. It's so sophisticated now that when you're reading and you're learning how to read, we can see each word as it hits the retina and what happens to it in the brain that follows. So the programs we can make and the things we can do are quite extraordinary. But even more important discoveries is finding that we are alive in an energetic system, in an energetic cosmos. And this energy does not stop at our skin. So we live with a dual system, energetic brain, a rational side, and an emotional side. And we have always thought that all our neurons were in our head. Turns out that that's not the case, that we are finding neuron-like cells in the heart and in the gut with direct connection to our intuitive selves. So if we manage through meditation or quieting ourselves or some system that we use to quiet the rational side and listen to our authentic self, we get messages that make us very powerful. many people, especially children who have had failures in school, underestimate this power. And now we're discovering that the internal environment is just as important as the external environment in determining the power of what we can do and achieve. So inside us, the neurobiochemistry is determined by our mind and our thoughts. And if the mind is negative, it flows with the cascades of cortisol into the system and prevents us from really learning effectively. So if we think we can't do it, if we are afraid, if we experience bullying, if we are told we're a failure, then when we go to school and we try to learn, we're at such an enormous disadvantage. And that's true in children, and it's true in adults. But here's the thing, that if you are full of hope, and you are told that you have possibilities that you didn't maybe dream of, and you are shown that you can do it, then the internal chemistry is different. And all of a sudden, you're starting to achieve things you could never achieve before. Because of course, the performance is dependent on what is there. So like the other day, we were talking about the idea of eustress, the idea that when a racehorse races, it is full of the positive adrenaline and norepinephrine, all the things that create the positive space. But if you ask that same racehorse to pull a plow, he'd be full of stress. But if you put a plow horse on the race course and asked him to run fast, he would be full of stress too. But give him a plow and he'll pull his heart out. So when we are in the space of our passion, when we believe in what we are doing, then we are full of a very powerful, energetic internal system that we have not had access to when we were thinking that this was all we could do, that we were average or that we were a failure. That's what happened to you. And we saw you beautifully perform on stage and doing all your thing that you didn't think you could do, but of course, you could. So now let's transfer that to the whole idea of the Visioneers, because we are finding people all over the world who are extraordinary achievers. And we are gathering them together to honor them for their lifetime's work or for the work that they're starting if they're young. And when they come in the company of their peers, old or young or whatever, and they start to see the extraordinary work other people are doing, and they feel they are honored in this place, in this round table that we have created to help us, to advise us, then we get a powerful group of people like nothing we've seen before. So when Margaret Mead was talking about we few are the ones who could do it and it's the only way it's ever been done, you better believe she was talking about us. There we are, we few, we're starting. But extraordinary things even now are starting to happen. So we have selected from our group of Visioneers some of the most outstanding among us and invited them to the round table to help us think this through. And in a creative...
Maybe before you create the roundtable for us, share with us first, who are the Visioneers and what are the Visioneers for people who maybe have never heard of the Visioneers before, and maybe tell us a little bit about what the platform is about, and then tell us about this roundtable, which sounds so wonderful.
Good thinking. Okay. So we have created a next generation platform on which we have put a virtual exposition of Web of Good Work with 11 corridors of extraordinary pavilions or groups of people in topics like education, the environment, across all human activities, the arts. And our job is to remove the barriers and the silos between these corridors and sit together and celebrate together. In each of these, so there are 9 corridors, and in addition, there are 2 very special corridors, one for visionary leaders who are leading us now with the most extraordinary work in all fields. in the arts, the sciences, in activism, in every possible way. And we are choosing them by choosing each other. So that's our process right now. Each of the Visioneers has an opportunity to enlarge the treasure hunt for us and nominate a group until we have a group large enough to move forward.
So
And the second most prestigious award is the award of Heroes of Humanity. And these are extraordinary people who may not be with us right now, or who may be with us right now. Even if they are not here, their work is still influencing us right now. So these 11 corridors are filled with, right now, with scores of incredible people, and we will be hundreds and possibly thousands.
mm,
And these people can act together, they can act as mentors, and together we are going to create the Congress of the Global Mind, which I'll talk to you about a bit later.
so I think what would really bring this to life for us is for you to maybe share some examples of the Visioneers currently on your platform and the things that they're doing.
Okay, so let me tell you this story, because here is another link between the Vancouver Learning Centre and the Visioneers International Web of Good Work. Several years ago, about 2.5 years ago, a young man makes an appointment with me, which is rare, sits down in front of me and he says, "Do you remember me?" So I'm a very bad liar. Looked at him. I did not remember him, I had to admit. He said, "I was here when I was 8, and I couldn't read or write or spell or count. And you fixed me." Long story short, like Tatiana, he graduated with honors from high school, although he couldn't pass grade 3. He went to a very prestigious Canadian university. He got a bachelor's and a master's degree. And he's now at the University of British Columbia in his home school doing a doctorate. In between, he had a gap year and he went to Africa, landed up in Uganda. He was in this village and he could see that the children were not going to school. And so he asked why, and he was told, well, in this village, every child has a job. They carry a pail, would walk for about 2.5 hours to a clean water source, and every drop counted, and that's how the village survived. So even the 5-year-old who could carry a small pail would do this. In any case, he found a way to dig wells, and then he brought old containers, shipping containers that nobody was using, and he made schoolrooms out of them. And he created an app where teenagers from Vancouver were reading children's stories into this app. And as they spoke the word lit up on the screen on these old computers that he managed to put in this shipping container. And he found that he was teaching children to read. And now the group is called the Walking School Bus. Now the United Nations is supporting them in a refugee camp. They have built their containers out of some light box where they're putting solar panels on the roof to give energy to their computers, and overnight they charge other people's phones to sustain them. This year he taught 35,000 children to read.
It's incredible.
And he's going to teach hundreds of thousands of children to read as the United Nations supports what he's doing. And he said to me and to our team that he spoke to later on, says, "You taught me to read, now I'm teaching children to read."
Oh, that's beautiful.
Can you imagine the gift of literacy to children who could not read and what that will do in those countries? So that's one example of an extraordinary young person who has earned a Project Excellence and a Personal Achievement Award. And here's another example of a different kind, but equally important. This one has to do with a district in Vancouver, British Columbia, that's called the Downtown East Side, which is a kind of area that's in many big cities where lots of drug addicts and very poor people live in difficult conditions. and people are lying there on the street. And several years ago, Michael Abelman, a Visioneer, was asked what he could do about this. Now, he is an urban farmer who came to Salt Spring from San Francisco, and he has a big urban farm of 120 acres on this island. In any case, he went to the downtown east side, and he built containers. He brought soil from the Salt Spring Island and seeds, and he taught 75 of these homeless, unemployable people to be urban farmers. Mm. And they're producing, last year they produced 25,000 pounds of vegetables, sold them up and down the West Coast. And it's called Soul Food Farms. Can you imagine? And he's written a book about it, and he's willing to mentor other people. Can you imagine that this is an idea that could be used in many cities? So later when we talk about the sustainable goals, you'll see that this kind of project is not only addressing hunger and education and employment, but it really is dealing with the whole issue at the root, is that what's causing the problem of drug addiction is not necessarily the drug addiction. That's just the last resort. So this is another example of a Visioneer project. And in addition, we have wonderful, extraordinary people who are doing work of this kind and of every kind across the whole spectrum of human activities. And these are displayed in our virtual expo for anyone to see at the price of a click.
Amazing. So I understand there are hundreds of these stories of people doing these incredible things, and that your goal is to bring them together and create unified action and awareness of each other on the planet.
So the goal is to, what I'm calling, ingather the family of Visioneers, to bring in the leaders and change makers who are doing these kind of extraordinary things and ask them to work together on a project which demonstrates our human nobility. Tatiana, we live in a dark time at the moment. We're living in a pandemic. We're living in a situation where there's all kinds of political things, the war starting, and the effects of climate change, like fires and floods, are happening all over. This is a very dark time for humanity. And whenever we open the media, we hear the stories of all these calamities, the brutality, the violence, or the bad side of our humanity. And a little bit here and there, people talk about the good things. But a very large majority of us are good people working with integrity, empathy, kindness, the kind of ideas around which we have to build a new consciousness and a new civilization. We need to have this consciousness absorbed in the DNA of the next generations. And what we have in our humanity is a reservoir of goodness that is extraordinary, much more powerful. I was telling you about the power that you get inside you when you feel good, that you couldn't do before. We have a reservoir of goodness in our humanity that is the most powerful human resource on the planet, greater than oil, energy, fuel of any kind that we know, more richer in potential than any diamonds or golds or any inert object. It is an incredible resource, but we're not tapping it right. We have to educate people, and we have to interfere in this incredible negative smog that is being pushed on everybody, on children, even as young as 3 and 4, when you see the kind of video games they're given. So what does this take to change consciousness? Well, it takes an extraordinary thing to happen.
Absolutely.
Okay?
So
the
Visioneers, it sounds like you have a lot of agendas, a lot of activities on your agenda. You know, you have the roundtable, the Masterworks Emporium, you're also setting to work on the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And I wonder if you want to sort of share with us the overarching vision of all these projects and how they're going to come together to create this vision that you're carrying.
Perfect. Okay, so we started with the virtual expo.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have almost 200 projects on the exposition, either on there or getting on there or we're working on. And we continue to bring new ones on board.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who are in this virtual expo are all doing most extraordinary things. So, inspired by the ancient library of Alexandria, where pharaohs, kings, and queens gathered the best thinking of the time and put them in a library in a particular place in a very aggressive mode. They were going after the best, and this became the university for kings and queens and pharaohs who had access to these. What we're doing is we're creating a masterworks emporium, the great work of our time. We are inviting the Visioneers' work of every kind: music, art, documentaries, film, writing, poetry, podcasts, all these kinds of work. And we're going to display them to become the University of the Commons. This will be the place where people of every kind can go and read about the greatest thinking, see the great arts, hear the great music. They will be in a place that is a strong demonstration of our human nobility. Mm. And now, here's the thing. We have invited some of the most powerful of these thinkers to sit with us in a structure we call the round table, to help us think the creative process in which we take this extraordinary work from the margins where it now sits into the mainstream so everybody knows about it. So we have an extraordinary brain potential, intelligence potential in all the facets of our human activity sitting at the table helping us to create this. So don't you think we're going to do something pretty wonderful? One of the things is that the masterworks will stand there as a permanent legacy of the work of the Visioneers. And our tech team tells us it will last as long as the pyramids. So if it's out there in the digital world, then it's there. And so they will see the most extraordinary work of our time. And you know, if you build something of bricks and stones, you have walls that create a capacity of what you can put in a place. But in the digital world, the cloud and all the various things that you young people tell me about, there is an unlimited capacity.
There is.
So as we build this extraordinary masterworks emporium, can you imagine what it will be in 2 years? Well, we just started.
Absolutely.
So what are we doing? What is everybody doing here now? What we are doing is we're gathering together a group of people whose work supports the United Nations 17 Sustainable Goals. And we're working in partnership and in support of one of the organizations that we have chosen, called the Nightingale Initiative, NIGH, for Global Health, the Nightingale Initiative for Global Health. And these extraordinary people represent 29 million nurses working worldwide in every country now in our pandemic to save our humanity from this at the risk of their own lives and that of their families. What courageous, beautiful souls these health workers are, and all the supporters, from the people who clean the floors to the people who bring the supplies, to all the systems that are necessary to support health in every country in the world. So that's what's going on right now. There are 17 sustainable goals, things like poverty and hunger and education And now let me come back to the stories I told you as an example. So the United Nations has put these goals up, but it's very hard for them to demonstrate progress on these goals. But we're making progress on these goals every day. So we have devised a point system. So a project, for example, like Soul Food Farms, that's dealing with hunger and employment and health and wellness, and across all these various activities, even crime, and to reduce these sort of things, are given points for each of the areas that their project supports. And we will be creating a bar graph of 17 bars, which will be rising every time we put a new project on, to demonstrate how on the ground reality we are showing support and demonstrating support for each of the 17 United Nations goals. And in that project, we will have a team of people who will work in various ways with the United Nations. And so that's one of the projects that we will do. Apart from the roundtable, we will assemble a group of people for that. And as we find activities that need groups of people, we will put people together for that. And now we come to, where does all this go? And how do we put all this together? So we've given ourselves to October 2022.
Well, wait, if we're going to go into the Congress of the Global Mind, I want to prep this with a brief quote, because
okay, there you go.
I think that's where she's going, and if so, I want to set the audience up correctly, because for those of you who don't know, the Visioneers International Network was actually inspired by this book called The Visioneers, A Courage Story About Belief in the Future, which was written by Gerri's husband and partner, Dr. Desmond Berghofer. And many of the ideas that she's laid out in this presentation, have come from the vision presented in this novel. And the one she's about to go into that I caught is the Congress of the Global Mind. And I wanted to first just share this brief quote, because I think it really shows the inspiration behind where this is going towards. So this is on page 310 for anyone who happens to have this book. And it starts like this. The Congress will not be a meeting to debate and agree on words about what should be done. It will be a great symbol for the transcendence of the world to a planetary society of creative learning. It will be an event of epic proportions. It will engage people in every community on the face of the earth that can be reached by modern communications. It will share with them the crisis of civilization now upon us, and invite them in free and open participation to invent solutions that will work for them in their community and which can be shared with their brothers and sisters across the earth. Such a Congress is grounded in the belief that people must be given the knowledge and the freedom to learn how to do what to do. We can no longer mastermind the future of the world out of central planning and intelligence agencies, out of government think tanks, police boards, and the like. No. The way into the future is through empowerment of people to learn the lessons of history and move into the future in full creative flow in assemblies of their peers. So, I think that's very powerful. And from there, Gerri, please guide us into your vision for realizing this concept of the global.
Yes. We are taking a fiction story, but an incredible story written 30 years ago, called The Visioneers, A Courage Story About Belief in the Future. And we are making that fiction real. It was written 30 years ago, but it is a story for our time. And it is a story around which we can wrap the most incredible set of stories, so that we have thousands of stories instead of just one. But at the center of each is a new kind of ethos. We're moving towards a new culture, whether some of the people in the dominant culture like it or not. We're moving towards what Rihanna Eisler calls a partnership society, where people are equal, regardless of their diversity. It is their quality of character, their quality of heart that determines whether you want them in your space. Not anything else, not anything superficial. So all these stories are wrapped around a particular ethos that is different. Now imagine 2 years from now. Mine is 6 months. Okay? In the time between now and then, we will be gathering these stories as fast as we can, recording them, putting them in a virtual expo, recording them in our masterworks, support the 17 sustainable goals. And at the same time, as soon as we get back to being able to have concerts and performances of any kind, we will start the process of videotaping the most incredible multicultural display that celebrates our humanity that we can find. From every country where you can raise a video camera, as soon as we are able, we will begin to film some of these beautiful dances and songs and stories and ideas and poetry. We will intersperse them with the positive stories that are already posted on the virtual expo and the ones that are to come and invite stories further. Here's the kernel of this thing. Change in consciousness and in our civilization is not coming from government or the current establishment that has too much to lose in the process. It is going to come from the people. And it's not coming from a group of people who think that you can plan ahead and get it right. Creative thinking, the kind of thinking that Desmond and I have been teaching for 3 decades, it goes to the success of the nimble. You have a plan, but you have a dream and a goal. See, a goal is a dream with a plan. And that's where we're going. We're going to create this Congress of the Global Mind. And it will emerge from 5 energy centers around the world. As our Visioneers begin to show themselves, and we can already see that happening, we will designate centers of energy from which these stories will emerge and flow and tell the stories of their place and time. So we'll have 5 energy centers with Vancouver as the anchor. And using the technology that we're just learning about, we will broadcast this incredible story of human nobility. The arts, the dance, the songs, the music, and the positive stories around a whole new kind of civilization. Created not by a planning system, but by a million voices of planners and thoughts of planners from all over the world who allow themselves to think creatively, to be nimble in their place, and to weave their stories around this kind of an ethos. We're going towards a consciousness that is different from what it is now. And we need to teach this to our children. Make this wonderful, this wonderful example of our humanity available to our 3-year-olds. There's no reason that we can't do this with this digital source. We can have songs for children. We can have songs for adults, songs for anyone, and bring them together in this great Congress of the Global Mind. We don't know yet exactly how this is going to happen. And this is on purpose. I mean, we could make a plan to make a Congress. Desmond and I have run 70 events over the last 3 decades. We know how to run an event. This will not be an event of the ordinary kind. This will be a different kind of thing. Maybe it will need a new kind of name. Des called it the Congress of the Global Mind in his book, The Visioneers. And they had a most wonderful outcome from it.
They did.
But it's important to understand that when you have a million minds free to be creative and do something interesting, but you have a plan and a goal and a platform on which they can do it, then you can have an outcome. And so if people say, oh, those just few people, they just think that way, let's just go back to the 50s and do it the way we did before. You guys, we're not going there. The journey ahead into the future is unknown. And it's unknown because it is extraordinary, more than we can imagine at this point. But now coming back to the power here, when we start this thinking together of all these voices doing that, can you imagine what we'll get? And especially if we structure it, if we curate it, if we craft it in such a way that's accessible all over. So that's what we're trying to do. We're going to bring together the talent that we need to do this project well. And then that will be just the beginning. Because the United Nations is declaring the 2020s the decade of peace. Well, you can't do anything if you don't have peace. You can't do anything if you don't have your health. We've got to get rid of these pandemics. We have to stop this aggressive behavior. And we have to weave our civilizations around a whole new story. And what's more, it's not so new. This story is millions of years old in our humanity. The stories of ancient times reflect the kinds of things we can talk about today. But what we have to do it is extraordinary compared to what they had. So it will be a new way of reinventing this equality. And here's something really important. What do we mean by human nobility? This is a statement of character. It's a statement of character which says, such a person strives for excellence, is kind and thoughtful and empathetic. Such a person tells the truth. What an important thing. Is a person of integrity, supports justice, doesn't stand for the mistreatment of other people on the basis of what? Their color or the color of their sleeves. It's an absurd concept that has been invented by our humanity in the last 500 years. We need to work together to save this planet because we are in a place of great difficulty. And unless we work together and save the planet in all the places we know, we can't save it in any of the places we know. So we're beginning to understand that we're all connected, that we're all one. And I started out by saying we are an energetic people. We live in an energetic cosmos. Our brains are energy. We are made of energy. And if we use this in a thoughtful way, what we can create is unimaginable. So can you imagine all the things that we're going to do? Because the Congress of the Global Mind will be the liftoff for the next part of the decade. We don't know where we can go from there, but it's going to be a good place. And we want our thinking to be absorbed in the DNA of the next generations. And to do that, we have to take better control of the airwaves than we have now, the way we talk to people through all our media. So
yeah,
that's the story of the Visioneers. It was conceived of originally in this book that you showed us by Desmond Berghofer, and we're going to make that story real. And don't tell us we can't do it, because you better believe we can. Okay, I'll stop there.
Exactly right. Thank you, Gerri. Very, very powerful interview. Thank you so much for being with us.